start. And I'll drop a link here. It'll take just a couple seconds, and I'll drop a link in the chat. There we go. All right, Andrew, I'm glad you liked the meme. I came across that just today. I'm constantly meme harvesting. It's a sort of an irrepressible uh, urge on my part. So, and there's a certain the left one is more of is like an actual sort of message. It's not really. It's less of a meme than just some food for thought, in our conversations about dialogue and discourse, and the ability to just sort of noodle about things. The one on the right, I think, is an important message about supporting one another. So you have to just check that out. All right, got the link there. All right, hit the attendance. Don't forget that. And also, I just want to thank you for using. I'm behind in the grading stuff. So there was a comment, I can't remember who dropped it in the general chat about, like, has anybody else gotten grade? Who sent that? Yeah, Dave. Anybody else gotten their stuff graded yet? And then I jumped in and was like, nope. And so that is my fault. And I'm gonna next 2 days I will have some time and we'll catch up on that stuff. Okay. So just know that I'm aware of it and definitely feeling bad. One thing about doing writing is having some kind of regular feedback, as you go, as you progress. But here's my sort of my vow to you, which is with any of the writing assignments, once you've done one, you are free to redo it and go back to it. You can, take the feedback. We're going to talk just a little bit about writing, the very sort of last bit of writing stuff that I want to talk about. As you're moving out of the very short stories and getting a little bigger and moving to the regular sort of write a paragraph, kinds of stuff. Oh, hang on a second. I did realize I got to check my audio here just real quick. Come on, slow dog. Nope. Okay, there we go. Now we're better. Okay, thank you. Um, anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about writing stuff today, but we'll give you feedback, and I want to just say this about writing feedback and about the rubric. Right, the rubric basically says, don't make any mistakes, say something reasonable, and you get all the points. But make one typo and you lose a point out of 5. So is that pretty severe? And the answer is yes. But there's really a couple things. Number one, it's an encouragement to say, you know, um, don't make that mistake. Take a little bit of time. It's an easy assignment, really. I mean, 140 characters as a writing assignment is not the most, onerous assignment you're ever going to have in your college career. And, edit it. And don't just like auto spell check, okay? Because it can't get context. It can't get all the stuff. And you've got to, at some point, get these ideas about spelling in your head and grammar and, punctuation and things like that. And Dave, I just saw your rebuttal. It's all good. Mostly worried, that you maybe messed up something. Yeah, that's the right reason to check for sure. Um, and then Micah asked, where do we request a spice level? And you do it when you submit the assignment. You can either leave it as a comment on Canvas, where you just drop a comment that just goes, mild, medium, or hot, hot, medium, mild, or you don't say anything and that's mild. Or you can put it in. Well, you can put it anywhere that I can see it, which would be the text of the submission, not on the blog itself, but the text of the submission in Canvas, or a comment on your submission in Canvas. And we'll definitely look at that. But here's kind of the key thing. So thank you, Micah, for, kind of clarifying that. Even if we say hot, meaning we're going to try to give you, good feedback and be thorough, you got to understand that writing is really, really subjective. Okay, and this is kind of our little segue into writing. Writing is really subjective, and I'll share a story that maybe serves to illustrate. But I had a student once. We were working on proposal for something, but it was a situation where he was the one that needed to write the proposal. It was his proposal, and I was just sort of editing it. I was, playing the role of the advisor. And it was frankly so badly written. It wasn't even necessarily, by badly written, I don't even mean that it was grammatically wrong. The sentences all were grammatically correct, but I don't know. This individual just had a really difficult time just putting together coherent thoughts that somebody else could read. There's a thing called the curse of knowledge. You know what you know, right? Did we talk about this in class? Does this ring a bell? Did we talk about this in person in class? The curse of knowledge? But there is, anybody want to throw me a bone on that one in the chat? I thought we talked about it in class, but I really don't remember. But it relates a little bit to the orders of ignorance. But anyway, the curse of knowledge basically is that you have a difficult time separating yourself from what you know. It comes up in a lot of different situations, but one of the least of which is bad communication, because you don't know that the other person, doesn't know everything that you know. So you say something, but it's partial or it's sketchy. I've had situations where a boss maybe says, I need a paragraph about this one thing. What's it for? It's just for this report thing. It's only a paragraph. It's about this one thing. Well, in the boss's mind, maybe she knows, exactly what she really kind of wants me to write, but I don't know what she knows. You know what I mean? And that curse of knowledge leads us to a lot of, miscommunication. In any case, he had written this proposal, and I was like, I can't, I even know what it is you're trying to say, and I can't make any sense out of it. Let's just noodle on that for a second. I know what your proposal is, and I can't understand your proposal. I'm with you on the knowledge. I still can't understand it. It was just really, really poorly written. Okay, this is a punchline. Then he says, well, tell me what to change. Okay, now what's the problem with that? Anybody want to venture a guess? I mean, what's the problem with just saying, well, tell me what words to change? Give me the delta between this and the final one. What do you think? Give me your ideas on this. Yeah, Havoc. So he will absolutely learn by trying. That's right. Yeah, Dave, and he didn't write it. Yeah, if I have to tell him what the words are, otherwise you can just like hand me a blank piece of paper, just give me this blank piece of paper and then just say, here, give me the delta between that and the paragraph I'm supposed to write. Well, what do we call that? We call that writing the paragraph. And remember, as we talked about writing, that the biggest challenge of writing is editing. It's not like, I can come into what you wrote. You wrote whatever, you just vomited on your keyboard, and whatever the keys were that happened to depress from that, it's pretty gross. You just submitted that, and then you said, okay, here, Chuck, why don't you just tell me what to change? Well, for me to tell you what to change, I have to know what it was that was, first of all, I have to know what was supposed to have been written. But what was supposed to have been written doesn't exist, right? It's subjective. So that's what's in your mind. That's your creative process, right? I can't say I'm trying to write a poem, but all I have is like 5 words, and I'd like the poem to be 10 lines. Could you fill in the rest of it? Wouldn't be your poem, would it? It would be my poem. Um, yeah, so Frozen, it's like writing code. You can show me how to write it, but the knowledge doesn't sink in until you do it yourself. That's right. And this was in an educational setting where he needed that learning process. That's why he was going through it. And the same thing for what you're doing. So when you write these little, starting with something that's really short, the very short stories, and then the whatever we call the second one, the moderately short stories, whatever they're called, somewhat short stories. Um, you're going through a learning process. So I might say it's a bunch of mayonnaise, but I'm not. When just because you ask for hot, I'm not going to like edit your piece into a final phrase, a final form. I might say you've got, because here's what happens sometimes. I'll do that, and I'd be like, you got you got a run-on sentence, and then you got these words are misspelled, or you got a spelling mistake in line one, um, punctuation problems. But if I say you've got three punctuation problems and the rest of it, this is what will happen. You got this, I'll point out a few specific things, but they're meant to be like typical. And maybe I gave you a three. And then what I've, not always, but often enough to merit mention, somebody will like go fix the exact thing that I changed, that I said change, and then nothing else, and then resubmit it. Well, this is an opportunity to reflect, to look at what you've written, and so I'll try to give you feedback like it's really mushy or your ideas are not clear, and you got to just please, I beg you, please don't get pissed because I'm not telling you what the words are supposed to be. I need to be able to say it doesn't really make a point. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't. Um, I can't understand what you mean in your first sentence, or, try to look at that. And sometimes it's okay to DM me or, jump on a chat or try to, tease it apart a little bit, with what exactly is the problem. But just kind of keep that in mind, okay, that the grading just has to be by its nature a little bit vague, because the goal is not to, move you toward the solution. Also, it's not to deny you the opportunity to learn. So, but again, even if you crash and burn on the grading, um, you've got essentially a limitless number. I'm not really micromanaging this with any particular, structure, you know. So, let me see. I'm just looking at just comments. Um, so Daniel was grading final papers for a class that you TA'd for, and a student cited God, literally just wrote God at the end. That's bold, man. That's bold. I mean, the least you can do is, you know, right, Daniel? Least you can do is cite, like a reference, that purports to be from God. At least you know what I mean. But just that's bold, man. Um, Steve, yeah, I'm going to write that on Steve's. For someone who talks a lot, you say very little. Yeah, exactly. That guy had the pipeline. So, I mean, more power, But yeah, that's not a really adequate citation. So, all right. So, does that make sense? Is that making some sense? My goal is, I remember, okay, last story. No, it's not. I lie. I remember being at the University of Iowa, and I was it was freshman English, and it was, they called it rhetoric. But end of the day, they called it rhetoric, but we would call it like freshman English. It was basically the class. And I remember the teacher, who was, in retrospect, really, really brilliant. He was a PhD student in the English program at the University of Iowa, which is a top English program and writing program. Uh, I don't know how they got to that position, but Iowa, man, go Hawkeyes. Anyway, I remember that we'd get our papers back. We'd write our papers and whatever, and we'd get them back. This is in the days of paper, and they would usually just have like a few comments, and he'd have like a check mark, and then maybe like a check plus or a check minus. And at some point, I was worried about getting scholarship stuff, and I cared about my grades. And I know none of you do, and frankly, more power. Not none of you. Some of you don't, and more power to you. I was at the time pretty obsessed with it, and I just went and talked to him one day and just said, "How do you get an A in this class? I don't know what my grade is." You know, and he said something very profound, and it really, kind of stuck with me over the years. This was, by the way, wow. Okay, this is scary, but that was 40 years ago. It was 1982. Yeah, I was a freshman, um, an older freshman. I told you the story. He said, if at the end of the semester you are an A writer, you get an A. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's pretty cool. Because the problem I've always had with the kind of grading you get when you take freshman English in a traditional sense is you write, they have some writing assignment the first week and then they grade it, but it's ridiculous. It's like coming into French class and then the first week they give you a quiz on French, which you haven't learned yet. And then you sucked on the quiz and you already blew your A in the class. It doesn't make sense to grade somebody on a writing assignment before you've taught them to be a better writer. But I've seen that. It's more like an assessment, but it costs against your grade. So I've always just kind of figured if by the end of the semester you can be a better writer and improve that part of what you've done here in the class, then that's great. Then let's reward that. And if you're okay, just whatever, sucking at writing, or you're already good at it, or you don't care about the grade or whatever, yours to manage. But for anybody that either cares about the grade and or cares about writing and wants to get better at it, I want to help you do that. I want to help you get better. So, all right. I hope that makes sense. I want to talk about one other thing relative to writing, and in specific, I'm going to drag over here. This is Wired Magazine online. Let me. I'm going to probably have to move the force over here just a little bit. Yeah. So this is Wired Magazine, and I'm trying to figure out which of these two memes to favor. By the way, because one's got to go on top, and the other's got to go on bottom. Let me blow this up a little bit. I have not actually pre-scouted what exactly to reference or use here. Okay, I'm just going to. First of all, I wanted to introduce everybody to Wired Magazine. If you haven't, you know, if you haven't been exposed previously, I would recommend. There's a certain amount of the stuff on there that's not paywalled, and then there's a certain amount. And you got Jeff Goldblum, who is amazing. I love Jeff Goldblum. Um, anyway, I just wanted to use this as examples of writing. And in particular, I wanted to talk about a thing that exists in terms of making writing better, and it is the key sentence. Okay, one of the things you can do to make your writing better is to think about key sentences. It's not the only way, it's not the holy grail, but I did just want to, um, grab one that's interesting. Let's go. How about this one? The IRS drops facial recognition verification after uproar, and this is written by John Brodkin of Ars Technica. All right. So first of all, just again as a reminder, when you're looking for articles for the current events, I strongly recommend hitting Wired magazine. Um, and I have an account. I pay and support for just full access. Um, Now the interesting struggle. Let's see. It starts off. I want you to notice. Let's just look at this from a couple perspectives. One is meat to mayonnaise, the mayonnaise ratio. What do you note? Oh, I'm so tired. What do you note in the very first? Open it up. The Internal Revenue Service is dropping a controversial facial recognition system that requires people to upload video selfies when creating new IRS online accounts. Okay, talk to me. What's the mayonnaise? Where's the mayo? I would just say, and I don't know, who's our author again? John? Josh? John Brodkin. Yeah, I don't know John Brodkin, but that's just a really great, that's a fantastic opening sentence, you know? And those of you that had 3450 from me know that I'm willing to criticize when stuff really sucks. But you got to be willing to praise when stuff is really praiseworthy. It's super meaty. So first of all, let's just look at what's I got the is, first of all, the mayonnaise is like really mayo. The is a, that, to, when. I got six tiny little dollops of mayonnaise. And how many total how many words? We got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So you've got 6 mayo words, little mayo words, out of 24 total words. So you got a mayo ratio of 25%. If you're doing the math at home, you got 25%. Okay? That's a great ratio. All right? And because the meat words are really meaty and the mayo words are really mayo. The, is, a, that, when. What did I miss? To. Those are tiny little mayo words, okay? So look at the meat words. Look at the caliber of meat. Internal Revenue Service, that's the name of, the organization. Dropping. You see how much backstory you get just with the word dropping. If you said discontinuing, you wouldn't have the emotion of what does it mean when you drop something, right? I dropped a program. Means you had it, you thought about it, something happened. It's a teaser about backstory. Controversial. Facial recognition is a noun phrase, right? Facial recognition system. Requires. You go, IRS requires. There's always backstory. People's less meaty. But do you see how much meat there is before you get to people? Upload video selfies, okay, when creating new IRS online accounts. This is a tremendous. And I didn't do any scouting. I just figured Wired magazine being a really, reputable and maybe the best, kind of marquee sort of property, for this kind of writing. I just figured they would be good. Then we go with a quote, and this whole next part here is just a big quote. Okay. Now, what's interesting, I'm trying to find something. These are really short, but what I want you to look at, I'm just trying to find a slightly meatier, so we can look at a key sentence. And I've got my big screen right here that I'm looking at it. Most of these sentences, and this is also more of an online form with shorter paragraphs. These are like, each of these paragraphs is generally looking like 2, maybe 3, but typically 2. Do you see it? Yeah, that's writing style for Mr. Brodkin. Anyway, I'm just trying to find a suitably lengthy paragraph. Let's go with this one, Ron Wyden. Let's go with this paragraph right here and see if you can. The idea here is, and by the way, this is big enough that you can see, right? Is that because I can blow it up just a little bit more? That's a little easier. Yeah, this is actually 3 sentences. Is there one of these sentences that you would consider to be yeah, so I was trying to find Dave, the shifty-eyed healthcare AI on the sidebar. I don't know. This isn't going to be. These are quotes is the problem. Let's go to this one. Let's go to this one. The IRS process involves uploading a photo of an ID, such as a license or passport, along with a video selfie, which are compared against each other to verify the user's identity. ID.me explains that if the process fails, you're routed to verify your ID over a video call. You need to show your identity documents. Okay, looking at that one, we've got three sentences. The first one that starts the IRS. So the first sentence is, and I'm going to do a survey. I'm going to do a survey, okay? A key sentence captures the purpose for the whole paragraph to exist, okay? And there we go. There's the survey, and just add your response to that statement with a number 1, 2, or 3. And I think it's big enough that you can read it. So again, you see the survey? I got no respondos to the survey yet. Survey's on Discord on the chat. Wait, isn't there like, can't we get just straight up numerals? Who did that? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not. Or we could do metals. Okay, there we go. So whoever did the 1, 2, 3, 4, can you get rid of that one? All right, there we go. We go. Yeah, Dave, can you get rid of that 1, 2, 3, 4? I think it's just confusing everybody. If you just click it again, I think it'll vanish. There you go. Okay. All right. So far, interestingly, we've got number 1, which is this part right through there. That's sentence number 1. Sentence number 2 is this ID.me explains. That's number 2. And number 3 is that part, that last sentence. And at this point, 2 has dropped out of the running entirely. 1 has the advantage, and 3 is trailing. 12-9 right now. Yeah, is everybody cool on what's 1, what's 2, and what's 3? So number 1, let's take it. Right now the voting is 13-10 in favor of sentence number 1. I'm going to go ahead and vote. I think it's also sentence number 1. And that doesn't make me right. That's my take of it. Remember that the key sentence, first of all, I don't think, Mr. Brodkin was writing around key sentences, was writing directly to generate key sentences. I just think that good writers, generally when good writers write and there's a paragraph, there's some chunk of it, some sentence, could even be a sentence fragment, but at least something that is definitively what the thing is about. And so one way to write a paragraph is to start with just write the key sentence. Often key sentences tend to be the first sentence. They don't have to be, but they often are. I noticed something once. I was in a writing workshop a number of years ago, and I took it was a refereed paper that I had, hang on a second. It was an academic paper that had been published. And I was in a writing workshop, and I was looking at my own academic paper, trying to figure out whether, I wasn't writing it with key sentences in mind, but I was trying to figure out after the fact if I could find key sentences. What was really interesting is I found a completely consistent pattern in my papers, and it was always kind of true. In any given section of my paper, the first paragraph had the key sentence as the last sentence. And then every paragraph after that, for that entire section, the key sentence was the first. And it was interesting because I wasn't doing it deliberately. I just had evolved as a writer to doing that. Because in the first paragraph, the idea was I'm kind of introducing you, bringing you along, bringing you up to, and then at the end of that first paragraph, I'm ready to give you the punchline. After which, I'm saying basically what I'm going to say in the paragraph, following it with the meat, the bulk of the backup, or, why you should believe it, or a little more about it, or a few other interesting tidbits. But that first sentence just kind of starts and lives, right? And what it does is it makes your writing really tight because it starts off with a punchline. So let me just look, just out of curiosity, look at this guy's article. The next paragraph, ID.me verification was already required for people creating new IRS accounts. Then there's a phase, and it talks about a phase in, but that first sentence is clearly the key sentence. A group of senators, Republican senators, wrote a letter to the commissioner saying the following: senators objected to the intrusive verification measures. To me, that's more the key sentence, that last one. Another letter urging the IRS to abandon the facial recognition was sent by 4 Democratic House members. Clearly, I think that's the first one. It's a little tough when there's only 2 sentences in every paragraph. Okay. Anyway, all I'm trying to do is just get you to think about. I'm going to look at one more just for grins. Okay. But what I want you to just think about is when you're writing that paragraph, I've said this before, think about deleting the first sentence in any given paragraph. I'm not saying it's always worthy of deletion, but I'm saying it is a lot of the time, okay? Give some strong consideration to deleting the first of whatever. First paragraph in a chapter, first chapter in a book, first sentence in the paragraph. Because when you're an inexperienced writer, hang on a second. When you're a less experienced writer, you tend to use your writing as kind of a runway. And so you just start saying, a lot of people these days are up in arms about crypto, blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to say in this little paragraph, this short paragraph, you're going to say like 5 different things. You're going to tell me, you take this journey. Whereas the paragraph ideally kind of sits in and lives to serve one purpose. Okay. I hope that makes sense. Should we look at one more just for fun? I had to throw a cough drop. I hope this isn't making like crackly sounds. I got the headbuds in. Headbuds. Actually, since what is today? Tuesday? I didn't say this. I said this to my gang yesterday in 3450, but I've actually had, starting Sunday, I've had like this tiny little sore throat, which hoping it's not, something more serious in our paranoid world that we live in now. Um, like the monkey, doesn't he look vaguely like the monkeys from the British band Gorillaz? Let's see. What do you think? What should we grab? Crypto is funding Ukraine's defense. Yeah, Andreval, we've got to talk to you about, you know, the way you're reading WebMD. I think you may be over clutching on your interpretation. Wait, what's that? Had an open mic for a second. Okay, what do you think? Crypto or um, let's go crypto or folding phones. What do you think? I get no respondo here. Folding phones. I'm with Sam. Let's go phones. Sorry, Havoc. Snooze, you lose. Besides, it's 3-1 on folding phones right now. Okay, who do we got? Boone Ashworth. Again, I do not know Boone. Love him or hate him, folding phones are sticking around. Um, First of all, I just want to say, oh, interesting. Steve asked, would it be of value to see if anyone wants to review any of their short stories slash blogs? That's an interesting thing. And Dave, thank you for the. It's off topic, but I mean, it is really interesting to see that incredible decline. If everybody can see that, what who posted that, Dave, with sort of COVID with the Omicron spike in January. Yeah, yeah. So Steve, I want to just say, if anybody is game to kind of workshop their short story, I'm game to take a few minutes. And then Radioactive said, "Does anyone have a folding phone?" No, I don't. It feels weird to me. Like here's my problem. As long as we're off topic, my problem with folding phones is I just can't conceptualize unless it's folding like a laptop. You know what I mean? How you I mean, I've seen the ones that are like foldable material. That just seems doomed to me. But again, I'm. Remember we talked about the origins of ignorance. I am very ignorant about folding phones, so I really don't know. Um, Whoa, Shiloh, you have the one on the right, and you love it. Okay. I mean, anciently we had the old Motorola clamshell. Yeah, there we go. That's it. That's the bad boy right there. That's nice. Radioactive. Thank you. The old, I had one of those Motorola clamshell. No, but yeah, that's what we're talking about. Okay. No, I'd love to hear more about what you're, it's not our point, right? But let's just take a look. Let's read just the very beginning. They're bulky and fragile. They're expensive. They come in peculiar shapes. They may not run all the apps you want. And of course, there's an annoying crease right in the middle of the screen. But despite those shortcomings, foldable phones are here to stay. I think that is a fantastic opening paragraph. Let me break it down and try to see why. First of all, it's a good meaty paragraph, as Steve said. But notice, let's take a look. First of all, how many words are in the paragraph? I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 20, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30, 40. I got 44. Okay, we got 44 words in the paragraph, so it's about twice the size of the other article. Let's look for the meat. Let's look for the mayonnaise. And what I think I'm going to show you here is more mayo percentage here, and yet it still comes across as a very meaty paragraph. So I want to try to get down to why. There and there they come in. I'm going to go in with mayonnaise. They may not all the you want and of course there's an in the of the we're at 21 but despite okay those are to okay it's about 25 and your mileage may vary. You may look at that and feel like what's meat, what's mayo, but you got 25 out of 44 mayo. Why does it work? What I want thoughts on this one. Yeah, Sam. What do you think? Why does it work with that amount of mayo? 25 out of 44. What's that percentage, by the way? It's what is that? 60-ish? It's more than half. 57%. So we're pushing nearly 60%. Yeah. Okay. Dave said it's about rhythm. Yes. And the thing with short, punchy sentences, they're this, they're that, they're this, they're that. You're throwing a lot of they and they're out there, which is a lot of mayonnaise, but it sets you up. They're bulky and fragile. First of all, let's just start with this idea. Short sentences, they're bulky and fragile. They're expensive. They come in peculiar shapes. They may not run all the apps you want. Okay? And it sets you up. And of course, the pièce de résistance, longer sentence alert. But despite that, they're here to stay. Boom. So I agree with Dave. I think the rhythm is really, really kind of critical. The rhythm that it has a cadence, kind of a beat to it. Absolutely. And a lot of times you use mayo, so it's not a universal law that, Dr. K's law of writing, that you have to have as low a mayo number as possible. There is this I think really illustrates very, very well. The mayo sets up the rhythm. And without the mayo, you lose the rhythm. You lose that cadence. But then when you do drop the meat, look at the meat, bulky, fragile. And then you juxtapose bulky and fragile together, right? Bulky, fragile, expensive, peculiar shapes, annoying crease, and even an expression like right in the middle of the screen. So the second thing is when you are using meat words, look at the meatiness of the meat. They're great meaty words, foldable phones, shortcomings. The third thing that I see is not just the cadence, but there's a colloquial feel. There's more of the language is more of like a spoken kind of rhythm, right? They come in. They may not run all the apps you want, right? That's more mayonnaise-y, right? And of course, right in the middle of, right? These are more like spoken phrases. Okay, so sometimes you use extra mayo to give you some personality. It'll be a little less dense, but it's going to have its own rhythm and its own personality, which is going to kind of endear you to, where the writer is taking us. Let me see. I thought there was one other thing I wanted to say. Oh yeah, look at the next one. The next paragraph. These curious gadgets. We have curious gadgets crawled out of the primordial ooze of science fiction. Okay? Now, crawled out of, it's a phrase. This author is using more phrases that involve, Mayo words to make the phrase, like crawled out of. And then primordial ooze, you get the whole backstory. So again, all the meat gives you the backstory. Okay? Um, The first wave were strange, unwieldy. Cost. How much money did they cost? Gobs, gobs of money. Okay. Creased, awkwardly shaped screens. Okay. Foldables from Samsung, Microsoft, and Motorola unfurled themselves into consumers. So this is, in my view, this is a great writer, or at least this is a really, really well written piece. Okay. But you see how stylistically it's so different from Bodkin, that we read. So anyway, all right, that's probably good. I wanted to introduce you to this idea. And again, there's a style in online writing that lends itself to shorter paragraphs. So the key sentence, um, like take this one right here. Some of the problems that plagued foldables in the early days list in between the M dashes, there's a list, have not vanished, but they've ebbed. Now, foldable phones present a more acceptable risk level for a growing number of buyers. That's key sentence. Okay, this last thing right here is the punchline. That, in my view, that's the key sentence. Okay. Now look at the next one. Still, foldables are very much a niche market, or a niche market, if you prefer. Then comes justification. Of the 1.5 billion smartphones sold, 5 million, this means roughly 1%. That, right? That's justification for what I said at the beginning, what the author said. Foldables are very much a niche market. Okay? So, you see what I mean? Foldable phones present a more acceptable risk for a growing number of buyers, but they're still niche. You see that's what the two paragraphs said. That was the punchline of those two sentences. Think about that as you're doing your writing, and it'll has the potential to change your writing mojo, your writing moxie. Um, and then the other thing I would just say is practice. I'm going to get rid of that. Practice even in your spoken language, thinking about meatier words. Up in your vocabulary. Try to learn a word and use it in a conversation. Get a challenge buddy among your roommates or your partners. Somebody that would go there with you and embarrass themselves in public. Okay, is that good? Cool. Um, okay, Steve, why don't you just drop your short story into the chat? So Steve would like to submit a short story. You ready for this, Steve? Prepare for public humiliation. Initiating in 5, 4, 3. Throw it down, baby. You can the short stories. You can drop the actual whole thing just in the chat if you want, or if you want to drop a link, Steve. I'm waiting on you to drop the link or the text itself. If you drop the link, we can put it on the big screen, which might be easier for everybody to contemplate. Oh, I think everybody's got access to the chat. Okay, you got the link. Let me. I'm going to do a thing here. And there's actually a comment on it, and I'm going to, all apologies to Michael, I'm going to try to shrink it just to kind of open it up to more of a fresh look by everybody. All right. Let me check real quick my layout there. Okay, and then let me blow it up a little bit. And then I'll have to stretch that to fit. By the way, Steve, is that 140 characters? You're not cheating on the length, right? It feels long. And anyway, give it a read. Give it a read, and let's see what you think. Yeah. That's okay though. That's okay. We can. I just wanted to start with, this idea that if we're going to do the very short story, that does need to, stick within. Okay. No, we can do this one, Steve. I think it's fine. Um, so let's take a look. Let me hang on a second. Got a hot mic from somebody. All right. So everybody, give it a read. Who's got the hot mic? Just a hot mic. Someone's not paying attention. Let's see. I can do a mute on my side, but I don't know if you guys will all still hear it. Sorry, I'm trying to find the mute here. Everybody I think can individually mute. Okay, I hit mute on my side. So if you don't want to hear it, you can mute. And then Jesta, is not a good look. Just FYI. I mean, in the sense that we're, you know what I mean, got the chat going, got the audio going, got the video going, and you know, being not dialed in, whatever. Okay, let's take a look. Um, this is Steve's thing. Let's take a look. Now, this looks like you're writing poetry. Was that deliberate, Steve? So, by the way, everybody can individually mute. I muted on my side so I don't hear the audio coming from our pal. And if you're still hearing it, you can individually mute. So what's interesting, there's actually, the whole thing rhymes. It goes rapping, which if you're Eminem rhymes with again, and meet, feet, win, begin. So what's interesting is I'm in this interesting quandary about whether that works. You know what I mean? What do you guys think? The rhyming, is it like, I don't know. My first reaction is I don't know if it works because I think I didn't expect to see a poem, and then when I do, I don't know, is that like overly clever, or you know what I mean? What do you think? That's my first reaction. The other thing, my next reaction: clicking, tapping, typing, figuring functions about text wrapping. Well, wrapping also is kind of loosely. It's very poetic, but very meaty first sentence, right? Now the figuring functions was a little confusing to me. You know, do you mean figuring out functions? And is there, and also, are you going for alliteration, tapping, typing, figuring functions? You know, again, is it going after this, kind of feel? The battle won, but war just begun. Now at this point, it really feels like it's trying to be a poem. The semester has started again, but again, I'm just one, voice, one idea. This to me wouldn't be losing any points. I'm just offering up, opinions since Steve wanted, feedback. With classes to find and friends to meet, let's not forget to hasten our feet. That honestly, Steve, to me, that goes a little corny at that point, like it's trying too hard to rhyme. That's just my view, but I may be outvoted on that. Lots to learn, the race to win. Lo and behold, let the fun begin. Um, yeah, okay, so like Daniel said, when I see rhyming, then you get really conscious of rhythm. And there's a few bits where the rhythm feels a bit bumpy. So I think that it's risky to to it's a matter of expectation. When you're writing, there's an issue of expectation. The author should have some sense, kind of, a little bit going in, or if they're going to be surprised, maybe be pleasantly surprised. Um, but like for example, the lo and behold usually is an expression. First of all, it's definitely an archaic. Where am I at here? It's an archaic expression. It's Michael's comment. I was just trying to grab that. Lo and behold usually is an expression that we use to describe, you know, so there I was walking down the street, and lo and behold, there was $100 bill on the ground. Something revealed. It's a kind of a cliched way of saying. Then there was a reveal, right? So lo and behold, let the fun begin. To me, is kind of like a mixing of ideas that it doesn't like sync up. And by the way, so Steve just said, I think you're right. Um, I would have bet $100 that I just found, lo and behold, on the sidewalk, that you would have said that the rhyming was deliberate, that it wasn't accidental, which is fascinating, really, really fascinating. Um, because the challenge is, I think that I don't know. Anyway, other comments here. Yeah, to me, okay, and again, I know there were a few of you that said you thought it works as a poem, so justify yourselves. For me, it doesn't. It goes into like it distracts me with the poetic, with the rhyming. Then I don't know if it's a poem, if you know what I mean, or if it's just trying to be cutesy. So Dave said, if it's a poem, make it a poem, indents in the whole thing. You know, I mean, I'm on the same page. I'm sucking up to Dave here. I am leaning the same way. So what's interesting is if you edit, Steve, from behold, let the fun begin to the fun has begun, now you're still rhyming with fun and begun. But it's a good meat to mayonnaise ratio. I don't know. What other thoughts do you have? And then we'll shift off, start talking a little bit about history. Um, yeah, Matthew just said a little bit of cliche, a couple cliches. I feel like there's a little bit of cliche to it. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's our collective take right now, Steve. But I wouldn't ding it. You know what I mean? I would, in the grading, I would give this a 5. There's no spelling mistakes. There's no punctuation mistakes. It's fun. You know, it's fundamentally stable. You know, I don't want to get into a mode of just like, you know, it doesn't perfectly match my personality, so therefore you lose points. You know, to me, that's not. I don't think that's really fair. Um, we've all probably been through that a little bit in English class here or there. So anyway, Dave and I seem to align. You know, this prose usually responding to Daniel. Oh, that's true. That's true. The semicolon is a bold play, as Daniel said, and correctly used. Rare, rare. Kudos for a semicolon correctly employed. All right, I'm gonna call the discussion. We good? Steve, I don't know. I hope that's helpful. It's just sort of honest reactions, you know, and at some point you got to figure out, you know, when is writing good? I think writing is good when it connects with the audience you'd like it to connect to. And if it fails to do that, but connects with a different audience, maybe that's not great because you're, you know, I'm not speaking to Steve now. I'm speaking generally. You know, does that make sense? If I hit an accidental audience and that wasn't my goal, you know, and then I don't think it's not mission accomplished. You know, I mean, now you may just look and go, wow, it looks like I'm really more of a children's author. Therefore, I shift my writing focus and become a children's author. Find that it's just more, you know what I mean? Or if I think I'm a guitarist and all the music I write just tends to have really, you know, heavy bass components, maybe I'm really a bass player trying to, you know, emerge or whatever. Finding your own voice and what you're, you know, sometimes we're well suited to reach out to a certain audience, sometimes we're not. So, um, all right. So that was bold though. I appreciate the courage, Steve. Okay, let me see. Um, Let me see. Okay, let me get rid of that. Dave, is anybody else losing audio? I mean, it could be being lost on my side generating it. Okay. Just you, Dave. Sorry, man. Okay. Alrighty, we got 10 minutes. Let's just get kicking in. You know how I don't care too much about the overarching schedule as long as we're making progress and having some interesting conversations. I want to talk about the history of computing. And there's a couple kind of big reasons why I care and why I want to talk about it. Uh, there's the classic, statement by General Santayana about that, those that don't know history or are not familiar with history are doomed to repeat it. That's I like the sentiment of that, and I think it's sort of predominantly true. Very few bumper sticker type quotes are strictly true as written in the absolute sense. You know what I mean? Um, you know what I mean? If you see uh, absolute statements, absolute kind of meme like statements, they're almost never really completely true as written. So, but they're exaggerated or stated in an absolute way, um, primarily to make a point, to get something across. But what's interesting is about that classic statement, um, that you're doomed to repeat it. I think that relates to, for example, negative, because doomed to repeat it. There's another version of it which is doomed not to repeat it. And I think that when you're talking about things like, understanding the history of, yeah, um, when you're talking about the history of I don't know, government is a good one, right? I mean, there was a reason why, in the American Constitution, Bill of Rights, it was all built around, look, despotic, authoritarian governments do have a tendency to get carried away. That is what history teaches us. It doesn't teach us that we give a lot of power to governments and they tend to make everything better through their benevolence. This is not, what, so that's an example of sort of doomed to repeat it. Okay. Um, the flip side of that is the doomed. Hang on a second. I am doing a trick here. Maybe I'm doing a trick. Come on. I'm going to stop here in a second. This is worthless. Okay, there we go. No, I was just trying to, for the rest of this little slide unit, I was just trying to nudge this into a more visible spot. So we have to learn about bad things that happen, right? And the dynamics by which bad things happen. What the fruits of censorship are, right? So that we can understand, what happens. Or, a lot of the things we've talked about so far are about understanding history. In historically, when one group of people believes that physical violence is justified against some group, uh, it is usually something that precipitates violence in the other direction, or it doesn't generally lend to a sort of peaceful resolve, right? One of the things that history teaches us, and in that context, if we don't know about it, we're kind of doomed to repeat it. We'll make the mistakes, right? Um, the flip side is there are good things that have happened. Somebody created something. Somebody made a company. Somebody innovated. Somebody changed the world, right? And if we're unaware of that history, then we're doomed to not repeat it. Okay? So it's like that flip side of being doomed to not repeat something. And the biggest reason that I want to, look at the history, I tend to, in this section, we'll talk about this for a couple of class periods. I don't know how many, but it'll be a couple at least. Uh, I'm tending to look at, the good examples in this one in the sense of look at this innovation, look at that innovation. Here's an innovation, that kind of evolution of great design. But I think that when we talk about things like censorship, and when you deal with, we understand, notions like, freedom of speech and things relating to government, but obviously there's a lesson when sometimes when you talk about things like freedom of speech, you're like, you understand, right, that the First Amendment, prohibits Congress from making laws prohibiting, right? It really is to bind government. It doesn't stop, it doesn't mean that everybody has to platform you and, things like that, which is correct from a kind of a constitutional law perspective, because I'm an expert at constitutional law, right? But no, from that perspective, it makes sense and is right. It's also true that there are, even in the citizenry and in the general flow of life, there are dynamics that come into play, relative to, you know, whatever the moment happens to be. That notion of there's a reason why, in the US and in a number of places, that sort of, freedom of speech, or that feeling about that applies, even in sort of private settings at some level, because there's things we learn from the past about it. That's the bottom line. In this case, if some of you want to I'm going to, one more survey before we're done today, because we only got a few minutes. The survey says, I'm potentially interested in being an entrepreneur. Um, and a yes means you see yourself maybe starting your own company. Yeah, Steve, you got to add that thing into the yes no. You can delete, Steve. You can delete your comment and then add yourself. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. I'm just curious, right? Because I think that it's one of the things that our field of computer science, more than just about anything I can picture, um, uh, lends itself to just starting something, doing a thing, starting a company, building something from scratch, hanging out your own shingle and becoming a consultant, right? So at some level, by looking back at the history, your own role in these things, hopefully it just gives you some context for, what kinds of things can happen. What happens in really big companies, what happens in small companies. We can talk a little bit about that as well, somewhere along this line. And let me just end with this, so we don't even have to get to the first slide because we don't even have time for it. But it's interesting that there's kind of a 13 no's, 9 yeses, and 6 maybes. Interesting. One of the things in my experience I did while I was an undergrad, I did some startup companies, was involved in some startups. And then I went to HP, which was a very, very big tech company, even at the time. This was the late 80s. Then and I hated it. Then I went to Novell, which was a medium-sized and growing, couple thousand people, and kind of caught a really exciting wave of innovation and focus and attention. Um, so and then I've done other startups, that I joined a startup where I was maybe like the 10th person in, and, I've done stuff completely from scratch since then. And, what I just want you to think about in your own careers, and we'll come back to this, but is thinking about what's the kind of company that you actually want to join. What are the dynamics of the companies. What's your core motivation? What do you get out of satisfaction of a day spent? What does it look like? Because that's going to determine in large measure what kind of pressure are you comfortable carrying around with you versus being a little more insulated by being part of a larger organization, right? These are things that all relate to, and I hope talking about the history of these things will plant some ideas for you. So anyway, that's cool. We'll come back. We'll come back on history of computing number 1. In the meantime, I'm never going to give you up. I'm never going to let you down. We're done. I will see you on, actually, you will see me on Thursday, and we'll continue remote this week and play it by ear. We'll see how we feel. Well, let's talk about it on Thursday, how we feel about next week.